Well, welcome to our weekly Facebook Live. Unfortunately, Facebook wasn't being as fun this week, so we are pre-recording this and it'll still come out on all the platforms that you're after. Today, I am chatting with Cath Tallack, who is the Program Director for Arrow Leadership Australia, and she's particularly going to be talking around how isolation is impacting and affecting our leadership. My name's Kylie Butler. I'm a part of the Christian Coaching Institute and have been coaching and training Christian leaders for over 10 years now. And Christian Coaching Institute is Australia's leading Christian coaching organisation. But Cath, I have had the privilege of knowing Cath for a number of years, both personally and professionally. But Cath, tell us a little bit about you and Arrow, and then I've got some questions I want to ask you today.
Yeah, sure. Well, thanks for having me. It's great to be here. So yeah, like you said, my name is Cath Tallack and I work for Arrow Leadership Australia. And Arrow, we are interested in seeing Christian leaders in Australia thrive for the sake of the kingdom. And so we do a whole heap of leadership development programs, investing in the life and the future of Christian leaders all over Australia. So that's my context. I'm also in Queensland, where the weather at the moment is just ridiculously good.
Stop it.
I know. You can see the sunshine in my office at the moment. That's just winter in Brisbane is the best. And married to Michael, have 2 little boys, and yeah, enjoying the ISO life.
Yes, good on you. Now, Cath, in your role with Arrow, you work with hundreds of Christian leaders. But as you interact with those leaders all around the country, what are you hearing them kind of struggle with or deal with in the current kind of COVID-19 landscape?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think I could answer that really pragmatically and tell you about all the different things that people are having to face in reinvention and, you know, like practically how, in particular, church leaders, which is sort of my bread and butter, how they're having to face the pragmatics of coronavirus and their world changing. But I think I'd like to answer it around the inner life of a leader, because really that's where the core of who we are and how we lead comes from. And I have been, I would say, surprised actually at how many leaders, really high capacity leaders who have really done the inner work to figure out, you know, how they tick and how they're wired and how they're going to be led by who they are. How much they're struggling with insecurity at the moment. I think there's a real connection between isolation and in particular, I think because we're outside of our routine, we're outside of the sort of regular rhythms of spirituality, of social aspects of our life, of family, of work. All those routines have been completely thrown out, and we're having to reinvent how we face each day. And I think insecurity has become a major player in the life of Christian leaders all over the country, and in all different, fields and ways and wondrous different ways that people are having to lead. It's been incredible. And I think as I sort of thought about it and talked to people about how they're experiencing it, I think because we're outside of those rhythms, because we're outside of the regular routines that keep us grounded to the truth about who we are, about who God is, about how we're called, about how we're gifted, about all those things that sort of keep us anchored into the truth. Because we're outside of those routines and those rhythms, all of those things that get in the way of us being great leaders, the leaders that God has created us to be, they're starting to get louder. Those voices that tell us that we're not good enough, those voices that tell us that we could never ever do this, those voices that speak to pride, that speak to greed, that speak to the darker places of who we are as a leader, those things that are going to pull us out of leadership are becoming more and more in our face and tempting. You know, I could name so many of those, but I wonder if people are listening, whether they know straight away what that thing is that is just getting louder, more in your face, and just pulling you away from actually the position that God has entrusted to you. And it's doing incredible things to the insecurity of us as a leader. Yeah,
absolutely. I certainly find that myself. I think one of the largest or the greatest voices that I'm, not the greatest voices, a loud voice that I'm hearing is that sense of value, of where am I gaining my value from? How am I feeling valued? Or actually in this season, not feeling valued, and how that impacts, my security as a leader, or particularly how it impacts the insecurity, and just feel really unstable in that space at different times. But we talked through just before, even some different ways of leaders, how they can be aware and what things they can do in this season. What have you noticed, or tips or insights you've got for us?
Yeah, look, I've actually been, like you, I've been challenged in this myself, though those voices that I've had a hold on previously are loud in my ear all the time, almost as soon as I wake up, and I've been really challenged personally by Luke 7 and the story of the faith of the centurion. Because here we have a guy who is a real leader, he's got respect and he's got power. He says, I tell people to go and they go, and I tell people to come and they come, and I say, do this and they do that. I mean, he understands his influence and his leadership. But what he also understands is that he can't carry what is God's to carry. And so he seeks out Jesus to do what he cannot do, which is heal the servant. So I've been really encouraged and challenged by that scripture, because I think in this season, we need to own our leadership. It's not a time to lay it down and say, oh, I can't do this anymore. This is new and different. It's not the time to do that. It's the time to step up and say, you know what, God has positioned me here for this season. God knew coronavirus was coming. And the season that we're in as leaders hasn't changed. He has us here for a purpose, and it's important to understand that. But I think it's also important to understand where God carries what we cannot carry, and to be constantly handing over that stuff. And I think really important to stay connected to the truth, really important to stay connected to the truth about who you are. Remember how God has called you, how he has purposed you, because that has not changed. This is a season, it will come to an end, and the purpose that God had in mind for you has not changed, and it is not on pause. So remember that. Stay connected to the truth. Stay connected to the truth of your gifts. God has gifted you. He has given you talents. He's given you passions. He's given you wisdom. He's given you education. He's given you all of those things. And they are to be used now, not put on pause. So stay connected to the fact that you are gifted by God, and stay connected to who you belong to, because that hasn't changed either. God is still our Heavenly Father. God still is ours, and we are his. And so I think staying connected to who God is and who we are because of Jesus is really, really important. And finding those rhythms in a different way. So for me personally, I am such a staunch kind of every morning, open my Bible with a cup of tea, journal, pray, 30 minutes, the same, Spotify playlist every morning. That's very much me. But I've got my kids home. I've had to reinvent a whole range of different things, and my life and my routine is just different. And so I've had to shift what that looks like. I do not get 30 minutes of peace with a 3-year-old and 9-month-old at home, that's just not happening, right? So I've actually gone back to a visual journal, which is something I did when my kids were really little, like babies. And every time I see something or hear something that's just a grab for me, that connects me back to who God is and who I am in him, I just grab it and I put it in that visual journal. It's a digital thing that I use. And then when I do get a minute, maybe it's just before I'm going to bed, maybe there's, a moment where, Jesus intervenes and both my children are asleep at the same time. What a miracle. And I go to that little journal, and I just scroll through the things that have jumped into my world, into my space. And it just reminds me of who I am, of who God has called me to be, and who God is. And it just keeps me connected to that truth. So find a new rhythm, find a new routine that's going to keep you connected to that, because people are leaning on us for leadership. That hasn't changed. Our influence hasn't changed. Who we are hasn't changed, and we need to step up and believe it.
Yeah, wow. That's such beautiful insights and incredible depth in that, Cath. What about leading others? How do we lead others well in this season?
Yeah. So I'm a big believer in that 360 view of leadership. Like, it's not just about the people that you're responsible for, the people who are looking to you for leadership, but also the people that you're leading up, the people who are responsible for you.
Yeah.
And the reality is insecurity gets deeper and deeper the higher up the ladder you are. So think about the people that you're leading and how you can actually ask them how that insecurity and how those voices are getting louder in their life. And I'm a big believer in those 5 questions from the High Impact Leader from Carrie Newhoff that I'm sure loads of leaders use and loads of coaches use, I'm sure, everywhere. How are you doing? Is there anything I can do to help? What are you working on right now? What obstacles are you facing? And is there anything I can do to help you accomplish the goals that we've set? Those
Great
5
question.
simple questions. Every time we meet, what are the things that you're working on and how can I get involved? How can I help you? And really that number 1 question, how are you doing? Yeah, but how are you really doing? What's happening here for you? And helping people to believe who they are, remember, stay connected to who God's created them to be. And I really want to encourage people to lead up in this season as well. I've connected with a couple of leaders just in the last couple of weeks who are leading huge things, like, big churches, big organizations, big movements. These people that I just think have it all, like they've got it all together. And if only I could be a little bit more like them. And just in the last couple of weeks, 3 actually significant leaders in this country have told me that they are struggling with insecurity more than they ever have before. And it just struck me, insecurity gets deeper and harder to deal with the further up the tree you get. So my encouragement is encourage those above you. Send them a text, give them a call, do whatever you got to do to say, you're doing an amazing job. And I feel so blessed to be led by you.
Yeah, it's fantastic, Cath. If anyone is actually wanting to get more info on Arrow, and particularly the leadership development that you guys do, how can they get in touch with you guys?
Yeah, jump on the website, arrowleadership.org.au. Check out all of our programs and what we're doing. You'll see my contact details on there. I'm looking for people to chat to. So get in contact with this extrovert.
Yeah. It's amazing. I get the privilege of being a participant in Arrow, and now I get to train in the Arrow space with you as well. It's incredible. For those of you who are looking at potentially increasing your coaching conversations or the conversations that you have with others, we do have our Coach Mastery course that is beginning in June. So for those who might be interested in kind of upping their skills in that way, you can find out about our new course there. You can also jump on the website and find all of the Arrow details as a part of, jumping onto some further leadership development. Finding leaders are kind of trying to grapple and grab all of this new leadership development stuff in this season as we try and figure out how do we deal with a very different and new way of being. So Cath, a bit of a summary of what I kind of heard from you, that sense of being and understanding our weaknesses, our vulnerability, and some of those things kind of get louder in this season, and being really aware of that, and I guess counteracting those voices, leading others well, and particularly encouraging the leaders that are managing us or looking after us, or in serving us in some space. But any final thoughts from you?
No, just know I'm praying for you. I'm praying for Christian leaders all across the country. So I'm with you on this.
Thank you so much, Cath. It was such an honour and a privilege to be able to have you online with me today, and just some incredible insight. And thank you so much. And for those of you who are watching this, we look forward to seeing you hopefully back live next Tuesday, 1 o'clock on Facebook.